Hi, good afternoon. I'm Allison Kirby. I am the grant writer at School District 5 of Lexington and Richland Counties in Irmo, South Carolina. I'm happy to be here with you today and share some expertise and some tips on how to write a wonderful knockout management plan to get your MSAP grants funded, and also share some tools of the trade and some tips and pitfalls to avoid when writing your MSAP grant, in particular, the management plan section. So, a little bit about myself. I've been with the school district for about 10 years. I have worked prior to my time at the school district in various educational, cultural, and human service organizations as a grant writer and fundraising professional. I also operate an independent firm that provides research and proposal development services to educational organizations. I have written three successful MSAP grants totaling $38.3 million. And I've written two that were not successful. I've learned from all of them. And I'm here to share that experience with you as you navigate your own project. So, first of all, what is it? What is the management plan? It is a small but mighty component of your application. It is going to be really the logistics of your project. It is a critical piece, and it's a clear and concise, succinct snapshot of how you're going to do what you say you're going to do. Okay. It is the intended to explain the process by which you will achieve your stated objectives and activities. It's that nuts and bolts. It explains who, what, where, when, and how all of these wonderful activities and programs you're going to do, how it's going to get done. It defines the connections between the people and the people responsible for certain activities to key milestones that are critical to a successful project. And it provides a timeline for achieving your performance measures, objectives, and outcomes. So your activities are completed on time and within budget. It has to align with your logic model. And above all, it serves as a roadmap for your project implementation. It's a lot of information. This section can get bogged down by details. So it's up to you to communicate the details and the complexity of your plan, breaking it down into chunks of information that are going to provide the reviewers and your project team with your roadmap, really, of how you're going to do what you say you're going to do. So, the quality of the management plan section. For today, I'm going to reference the notice inviting applications, the NIA, from the last fiscal year, the last current cycle, the last cycle of the grant from FY23. Please, 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 when this next cycle comes out, or for that matter, for any grant, always, always, always reference the current notice. These change every year. There might be some slight nuances in the way questions are asked, or the point values assigned, or the organization of the application questions. It is critical that you are referencing the current notice. Okay. So, for this purpose, we are going to look at the two factors that reviewers are looking at for the management plan. Number one, the adequacy of the management plan to achieve the objectives of the proposed project on time and within budget, including clearly defined responsibilities, timelines, and milestones for accomplishing project tasks. Up to 5 points is awarded for responses to that question. And the second factor is the extent to which the costs are reasonable in relation to the number of persons to be served and to the anticipated results and benefits. Again, up to 5 points are awarded for this response. So, getting started, where do you even start? Because it's a lot of information. My first recommendation is to review the entire NIA again and again. Print it out, keep it on your desk. Mine looks disastrous at the end by the time I do submit a grant. I have handwritten notes, I have highlights on there. It's going to be your best friend. Okay. So look for the common things, themes, and language between the different sections of the notice. When you're reading the notice, how does each section relate to the others in terms of point value? The sections are typically, now this in the past, it's been desegregation, project design, quality of management plan, quality of personnel, and evaluation. You want to look at the management plan within the entire scope of the application. Where does it fit? Those kinds of reflection when you're looking at that compare and contrast will help you as the grant writer and also on the planning team. How much space, how many pages should you dedicate to the management plan and to your responses? Don't be fooled by a lower point value for scoring when compared to the other sections. This section, this past time was only 10 points. It's not a lot of points, but they do matter in the grand scheme of thing. 10 points can make or break you, specifically on a grant that's this competitive and a federal grant. And also for only 10 points, this is really this is your implementation plan. This is how you're going to do what you say you're going to do. So it has got to be top notch. And there's a lot of information that needs to get in. And it's very tricky to get all that information in succinctly and in a way that doesn't bog down or confuse your readers. Also, I would recommend reviewing the selection criteria again. Look at those factors, look at the nuances. What specifically are they asking? And think about how you want to organize the information. So, getting organized, how do you get organized? What I do is these key documents that I list here, your logic model and your objectives and performance measures, your project design, your evaluation plan, you need to have a good idea of what these are before you even start the management section. I print out a hard copy of my logic model and a hard copy of my objectives and performance measures. That keeps me organized as I am really, crossing the T's and dotting the I's throughout the management plan and the timeline. You want to make sure that you understand those front to back because it's the nuts and bolts of your project, this management plan. You're going to need to make sure that these other components are already well thought out and planned and in place. Okay. You can't write a management plan until your objectives have been defined. You can't write a management plan until your logic model and your project design is done, okay? Because you're not going to know what elements or benchmarks or milestones to put in your plan if you don't have that project design already completed. In addition to the logic model and the objectives, having that hard copy there, okay, first of all, you need a big flat desk, okay, because I have hard copies of my logic model objectives, a hard copy of the notice of inviting applications. I also keep a draft outline of my project design. I want to make sure that I know the key components of this project from, A to Z and make sure that they're equally aligned and I'm referencing them in my management plan. Because, and this is true for any grant that you write, especially for one of this complexity, everything you reference in one section of your grant application or narrative, you need to account for it in the management plan. That's why I call it a small but mighty section, because it's a critical piece. I also strongly recommend looking at previously funded grants. I've provided a link to the Department of Education's MSAP page, and they have a list of funded grants for you. Look through them, and if there's one that you really like, print it out, save it to your files. Look at really how they organized their information. Look at how the other grants were structured. Notice the use of charts and tables. Notice the formatting that other organizations have used. Where did they use bullets? Where did they underline? Where did they italicize or bold their font or their text? Think about when you're reading and reviewing these other grants, think about how you want to visually present your information. Clarity and alignment. That's a phrase I'm going to use throughout the presentation, and I really want that to be your takeaway, because this section of the management plan, this really shows the strength of your project design by how organized you are and how much you understand it that you can complete it. Okay. And it needs to be clear to the reviewers, and it needs to align to all different sections. Again, it's a lot of information, so make sure that you're prepared to visually present it in a way that makes sense for your brain and your project team, but is also user-friendly, reader-friendly for the reviewer. So here we go, writing the plan. Factor 1, we're going to look at the FY23 notice. Again, when the next cycle opens, what are you going to do? You're going to reference the current notice, not this one. I will say though, with at least the last 3 cycles I've written in, factor 1 has pretty much stayed the same. It's the second factor that has changed a little bit. So factor 1, I repeated it here, and I've pulled out some key terms that are my takeaways when I read this and my interpretation of what the secretary and what the reviewers are looking for. They're looking for the adequacy of the plan to achieve your objectives. They want that management plan, the project team. They want to know who's going to do this. They want defined responsibilities and a timeline with milestones. So we're going to go through each one of these individually. Objectives. I like to include a snapshot of my project objectives at the beginning of this section. It's for ease of reference, it's for clarity. Your mission as the grant writer is to provide clarity and alignment with this section. There's those 2 words again, clarity and alignment. And to do that, I found it helpful for reviewers and my project team, once awarded, to include those objectives for ease of reference and also to demonstrate your understanding about the purpose of the MSAP grant. You're going to keep this front and center at all times. This is why we're doing the project, because we want to achieve these goals. Okay, so that's why you need to have them in here in this section. Only cite your performance measures if you have the space. Otherwise, note in the proposal that the readers can find them in the project evaluation section. That's typically where they go. I haven't had a lot of space, or I don't want to get bogged down in the specifics of the performance measures in this section. It's more to keep the main ideas of your objectives, okay? And again, ensure they align exactly as stated in all other sections of the proposal. A lot of times when we're writing grants, specifically ones of this size and complexity, things change in the grant writing process. A lot of iterations of writing and drafts. Make sure that your final product uses the same terms, the same formatting as all other sections, okay? Keep it clean. All right. Next is your project team. I like to use a table or chart to organize this information. I list it by positions, not the names. The names of the people are going to go in the next section, which is the qualification of the personnel. Okay. This management plan section is more interested in the positions of how you're going to do what you say you're going to do. Okay. I also like to include the location. Where, in terms of the structure of the organization, are they in the district? Are they in the school? Which office? That helps to define a little bit of the organizational structure within your organization in the hierarchy too. You might also consider adding a separate chart to have that hierarchy by position, just so you can show the chain of command as well. You want to include the project, provide the status of that position. Is this a position that's in place, or is it someone to be hired? And when you're looking at who to hire, this is where your planning team comes into play. You need to really look at how you're deciding, which positions are going to be on the project team, and what kind of positions are you going to need? Are they existing positions? Do you need to hire new positions? Which positions are going to be critical to implement your project? And even if there's not a specific question about sustainability, you need to have those conversations as a planning team now of how you're going to sustain any of those MSAP funded positions beyond the 5-year funding period. Okay. Those are not easy answers, and that takes a lot of time in planning with your team. Your planning team should include administrations at the district level, at the school level, and also teaching and support staff as well, because there's a lot of people that are going to be responsible for implementing these grants. They need to understand the full scope too, and what resources the district is allocating. Be mindful when you're looking at positions to be hired. Be mindful of the number and type of positions you're requesting for the MSAP funding. I've gone both ways, where reviewers, I've been dinged for having too many magnet funded positions. That was too resource heavy, and there was no way we would be able to sustain them after the funding period. I've also been dinged for not including enough positions for a project of this magnitude and scope, that we weren't allocating enough resources. So it's a very, very nuanced, fine line. Be mindful of that. A lot of decisions to make, a lot of planning. Once you have your project team identified, you need to define their responsibilities. So for each position, you're going to provide specific details of their role in relation to the overall project, including responsibilities for specific activities noted in the project design and logic model, and the accountability to achieving specific milestones. So I'm going to say it again. If you have activities listed in your logic model, in your project design, then you need to reference them here, and you need to have that accountability of who is responsible for what. Okay. If you mention it in one section, you need to have the accountability piece in this section. I always recommend using consistent formatting for clarity. I've done a screenshot here with a little snippet from one of my past narratives. Doesn't matter how you format it, just be consistent so it doesn't confuse the reviewers or the readers. The next section, the timeline. This is actually, I confess, this is my favorite part that ties it all together. It can be a beast, but this is really the critical piece that pulls it all together. It goes hand in hand with the logic model, because it links your project objectives with your performance measures, your milestones, your benchmarks, the person's responsible, the year, the quarter, everything. It is like this amazing chart that has all the information in it of the step by step, that logical process. Some people, they look at this and they're just overwhelmed and don't even know where to start. This is a format that works for me. I've found it to be very effective with my project team and with reviewers as well, in terms of the scoring. You'll notice on this snapshot that I took off of a previous grant, I reference the performance measures by number. Again, I don't have to spell them out. I can note that the descriptions and the descriptions of the full performance measures can be found under the evaluation plan section. I've also found that this is very helpful to our external evaluators when they are creating implementation rubrics upon funding. So they'll take this snapshot and break it down even further by school and specific activities by school that they need to do by month to quarter to year. So it's a very logical, step by step piece of information that is multiple pages long too. You might look at formatting this, adding some different color headings. Again, anything that you think needs to stand out and be clear to reviewers. Okay, that was a lot for factor one. Now we're on factor two. Again, we're looking at the FY23 notice. And it's interesting because this is really a cost benefit analysis question. It also is 5 points, and it just my personal opinion. It is much easier to write a response to this factor two than it was to factor one. And I don't think the point values reflect that in terms of the information that they're trying to glean from each of these factors. But alas, it is still important because this is where you get to frame the costs of your project within the overall impact of your project. Okay. So, one caveat, this is easier to write. However, you must already have your full project budget complete at the time of writing this. Okay. Because you're citing and also your enrollment tables too, I should mention, because you need to know how many students are going to be impacted, the number of students. You want to cite your implementation cost, your per student cost, per year cost, and you're going to link those costs to the anticipated impact of the project within the scope of your project defined outcomes and also the MSAP program level measures, which are found on the notice inviting applicants as well as the Department of Ed's MSAP website. One very important tip, if you are applying for competitive priority number one, which is need for assistance, you want to make sure that your response to factor two in the management plan aligns specifically with your response to CPP number one, because it's the same number of students, the same costs. Again, it's that clarity and alignment. You want to make sure that it's tight with a bow. So best practices, there's a lot of information. It's really hard to communicate what needs to go into the management plan within such a small time period within this presentation. So I'm going to leave you with some best practices and tips as you go about your management plan. Best practices, reference the NIA, look for the common themes and language, look at the selection criteria and point value, and write your responses through the lens of the MSAP purposes. Keep in mind the purpose of the MSAP program in all sections. Best practice number two, reference previously funded grants. Again, look for examples of how other applicants organize the management plan section and decide what works for you, what makes sense for your school district to how to convey that information. And above all, complete these other components first. Make sure your logic model is complete. Make sure your objectives and performance measures are already complete. Your project design is complete. Your budget is complete. Also, which I mentioned in the other slide, make sure your enrollment tables are already complete too, because you're going to have to cite your numbers served. And you want to make sure those align. Some other tips as you're looking at the management plan within the scope of the entire narrative. 3 things: collaborate, communicate, and carefully plan. I can't say that enough. These are transformational grants that do just amazing, give your school districts and your students and your community amazing opportunities. Because they are so transformational, they are so complex, and because of that, you must collaborate. Collaborate across departments in your district. Make sure human resources and instruction and accountability and planning, everybody is on the same page and they know why you're writing this grant and what their roles are going to be. That's going to reduce the risk for surprises down the road. And you want to align responsibilities as appropriate and allocate resources as appropriate. Communicate, engage with your stakeholders early. Your stakeholders they're going to be your champions. They're going to lead and implement your project, and they're going to provide you with feedback all along the way. It's going to be incredibly helpful for you. Careful planning is sustainability. Talk about sustainability from the very beginning. Identify the types of resources, the people, the money, and time that are going to be required not only to write the grant, but to implement the grant and sustain the programs beyond the 5 years. Think creatively, think outside the box. And finally, I said these are going to be my favorite words: clarity and alignment. A high quality management plan requires clarity and alignment across all sections of your proposal. Give yourself ample time to prepare and organize, and also give yourself and your team time to celebrate coming together to do such amazing work that will be funded. Thank you.